I wanted to highlight for you, just like on the very first slide, some photographs of the MRTT flying today. Because based on the initial requirements that you saw on the last slide, KC-45 was really the logical choice for us to offer and for the Air Force to select. It's the world's leader in air refueling, having won the last 4 competitions, nationally and internationally. I'm an acquisition person, as Randy said. I'm very familiar with DoD 5000. The new DoD 5000.02 is really a document that focuses on risk, mitigation of risk, and prototyping. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that this MRTT offering and our basis of our offering upon the good work that was being done through Australia and through construction of this tanker provided a proven and demonstrated platform and proven and demonstrated systems from which risk was minimized and mitigated. This was a platform that the U.S. government could count on with regard to Northrop Grumman's ability to deliver on time and on cost. Next slide. The map should look familiar. I'll let you digest this for a minute. The green states are states that have more than 500 jobs. So Northrop Grumman has said that the tanker program creates 48,000 jobs across 230 suppliers in all 50 states. So this really gives you a feel for where those jobs are focused. And if I get my geography right here, and I'll just point out a few, Wisconsin, 500 jobs, Illinois, 4,300 jobs, Indiana, 600 jobs, Ohio, 2,300 jobs, Michigan, 2,700 jobs, Pennsylvania, 800 jobs, New York, 1,100 jobs, Arizona, 4,000 jobs. And we are going to assemble and militarize these tankers in Mobile, Alabama, and you see 5,000 jobs in the Mobile area. So this is American-made, this is U.S.-built, this is America's tanker. Next slide. Warfighting requirements. I mentioned it during the very first slide in the slide deck here, that we understood what the requirements were. We believed we understood them very clearly. We listened to what the Air Force said in testimony. We listened to what the Air Force said in writing. And I want to just cite a few things, that we've read to understand the background. The warfighter articulates the requirements in many different ways. Obviously, in the document itself, in the request for proposal, in the requirements document that's typically an attachment to a request for proposal. But there are other means by which the warfighter articulates requirements, and typically they come through the form of white papers and other discussions. So I highlighted 2 in particular, and the one on the left is a 2007 document that really pertained to the original KCX RFP. The Air Mobility Command released a white paper, and they really described it as the KCX as their vision to transform the next generation tanker and provide a multi-mission, multi-role mobility platform. The document on the right was released the same day that the RFP was released. So this past September, again, the Department of Defense, the Air Mobility Command, reiterated its desire for the KCX to fulfill this multi-role, multi-mission mobility platform requirement. And it's titled, The Imperative for a New Tanker Now. So from our perspective, the paper on the left and the paper on the right are very, very similar. And so we understand that the warfighting requirements, as articulated by the warfighter, are very, very similar. It's very clear that the Air Force still wants a game changer. Next slide. So how did we get selected the first time, and what happened since then? This pie chart should look familiar. What we tried to do in relative weight, if you will, is summarize the major areas that comprise the last decision, the 5 criteria that inform the Air Force's decision to select the KC-45 as the best value, best capability solution. So this approach allowed the Air Force to assess air refueling capabilities, gave credit for increased capabilities and offloaded range, and it found that the KC-45 offered 22% more fuel capacity, 30% more offloaded range, 68% more cargo capability, and 6% better fuel efficiency when delivering fuel at range. The Air Force assessed the past performance of the contractors and had higher confidence in Northrop Grumman's ability to perform. They also evaluated cost and concluded that Northrop Grumman's proposal was a better value. And in operational scenarios, they concluded that the KC-45 allowed for the mission to be accomplished with 22 fewer aircraft. The bottom line was that KC-45 was found to be better, cheaper, and faster to the warfighter. Then you may recall there was a protest. GAO did a rigorous review of over 100 issues that were raised, and from those 100 issues found that 8 had merit, and essentially came up with a finding for the Defense Department that said, fix these 8 things and get on with it. The GAO didn't rule on the merits of the process. They ruled on particulars, issues within the RFP. And so we expected, based on that GAO finding, that we would simply see those 8 issues corrected and the RFP and the process to move forward essentially based on the warfighting requirements as we understood them from the last time. And after a few months of dialogue and deliberation, it was very clear that a strategic pause would occur and that the department would reconsider the starting point from which they move forward with the competition. And what we got really is, you've seen before, and you'll see it on the next slide, is this. Again, I mentioned when I first opened that what we got was vastly different in terms of requirements and structure and process from what we had during the first competition. So let me dissect this a little bit and fill in some of these boxes. This is the slide that the Defense Department briefed, released essentially concurrently with release of the RFP to describe how they were going to buy these tankers and the process by which things would be weighed and valued. So we start in the top box. And in the top box, we have these RFP and contractual requirements. And essentially, those are the 373 mandatory requirements. They're threshold requirements. And the threshold requirements are interesting in that they're all of equal weight. So let me talk about this a little bit. In those 373, some of those requirements are absolutely critical to the warfighter. Survivability, network-centric capability, fuel flow rate to the receivers, fuel maneuvering capability. And some of those things in the 373 are mandatory, and again, mandatory threshold requirements that might be useful but are probably of less value. 151 milliliters per person per hour waste flow in the aircraft lavatory. Hot and cold potable water that supports 473 milliliters per person per hour. Permanent lavatory that must be designed to be serviced through an external port. Sorting and maintaining 2 cold beverages and 2 meals per person per hour. Important, but the question is, are they the same warfighting value as the first category of capability that I mentioned? In this construct, they're all equal. Now, from there, I'll jump down to the bottom box, the non-mandatory requirements, of which there are 93. And in this box, which you only get to, as you know, if the bid prices are within 1% of each other, if they're within 1%, the process is triggered such that these non-mandatory capabilities will be assessed. And those things, as I mentioned before, are many of the things that we believe the warfighter values. They value them during the last competition, and we believe they still value them in this competition. Increased capability for fuel offload at range, ability to meet minimal fuel offload over a range from a 7,000-foot runway, minimum ferry range of 9,500 nautical miles, and key cargo handling capabilities. Critical capability that will not be assessed unless the bid prices are within 1% of each other.